Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, the podcast that celebrates the multiple hats we wear and the juggling acts we perform in life. Whether you're parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum, navigating the ever-evolving healthcare industry, or building a more inclusive and impactful world, this is your space to find connection, inspiration, and growth. Together, we'll share stories, tackle challenges, and explore how innovation and inclusion create better outcomes for everyone. Because no matter the spectrum, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Kaufer.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the lighter side of the spectrum. I'm David Kaufer. And you know, in this space, I've been fortunate to meet so many incredible parents who have taught me more than I could ever put into words. Each has left an impact and imprint on me, but few have impacted me as deeply as my guest today. Like many of you, my first introduction to Libby Ingram was through the Telepathy tapes, the epic podcast series that took the world by storm last year. Listening to Libby speak about her son, John Paul, the love that poured through her voice was something that you could actually feel and not just hear. And when we finally had the opportunity to meet in person in late September at her home in Atlanta, that love was every bit as real as I imagined. And as you'll hear later, was something that my son Stone felt immensely and immediately. So this is a conversation I've been looking forward to for a long time. Today, Libby and I are going to step into some areas she's never spoken about publicly before, so I'm even more excited. Libby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you. It's hard to believe it's been about a month since we got together there in Atlanta, and we'll talk about Presume Comp Fest. We've got a lot to talk about first, but I thought what we do, initially is, talk about John Paul, talk about Love John Paul and the foundation that you. I really want, because I love that. I love what you're doing there, and I want you to have an opportunity to explain it, what you're doing, and your vision, and all that good stuff.
I'm sorry about my dog.
Oh, I didn't hear it. Oh, no. You have a good mic. That's all right. We're used to dogs. We have dogs. We have
old girl.
Oh, yeah.
She's an old girl.
Yeah, I remember her. She was sweet.
Yeah, she's so sweet, but she heard something and it's driving her nuts.
Don't worry about it. Like I said, at some point, I'm sure that Stone will make his famous cameo, and people are used to it.
Like I was saying earlier, John Paul, if he were here, he would walk right behind me, butt naked.
That was
he was notorious for coming down to check it out.
That was like one of those kind of epic moments of the podcast. I remember when that happened. You and Kai were chatting, and she mentioned that he just kind of appeared. And I think it's funny you mentioned that, Lee, because that was one of those moments. Listening to it, I was just amazed at how well you handled. You just seemed to roll with everything that happened, everything that you talked about, things you haven't talked about. I'm sure. Like I said, I'm just amazed at it. How do you do it? How did you get to that point?
The thing is that it was really important to me to have a happy house. I just couldn't get upset about everything, and I wanted his house to be a haven, and a safe place. And also my personality, I'm more type B. I'm type A about certain things, but as far as him being comfortable and, then I didn't really care. And if he came down and, surprised everybody, kind of get a good chuckle, and then, we move on from there. But I just didn't think it was something. There's so many bigger things to get upset about, that those kinds of things to me just kind of made me crack up and smile a little bit. So that was, I just needed to not be upset about there's things that are just, I think they were kind of light and funny.
Well, and again, I tip my hat to you, because I think that there are a lot of us parents, many of us it's one thing to kind of say that and think that and kind of realize that, but it's another thing to put it into practice. And it's clear that, you have been able to do that, and you have a home that's filled with love. I think that's something that I felt. And like I said, I'll share in a little bit some of Stone's observations that may bring tears to your eyes. A little teaser.
I would love to hear them. I would love to hear them.
Yeah. So, for maybe the few people listening to the podcast who don't know your background, do you want to just tell us a little bit about JP and kind of the background, how the foundation began, and kind of, like I said, your vision for it?
Yeah, sure. So are we assuming people have not listened to the podcast?
There might be a couple people who haven't. You're right. I don't know. I mean,
no, not everyone's listened to it.
It feels like most of the people. Right. A lot of people
maybe
in
most
our
of our
world.
listeners.
Yeah. But there may be let's assume for those who haven't.
Okay. Well, my son, John Paul, was a non-speaking autistic. He was 17. He's a twin. And the thing about, we start, I'm trying to think how far I should go back. I'm also a speech language pathologist. And, I really do want to talk a little bit about that too at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
It came in handy, definitely, with John Paul. But, John Paul, we had started the whole project in 2022. And that was when we did the telepathy testing. And Katie Asher and I, we would kind of plan therapies together and stuff. And she's like, told me about this project. She's like, do you want to be in it? And I said, well, I'll check with John Paul. And John Paul spelled, it has to be done, is what he spelled.
Oh, interesting.
So,
wow.
Yes.
So that's
how we got in. Yeah.
You got in. So Kai reached out. I'm sorry to interrupt. So Kai reached out. Kai had somehow connected with Katie first, it sounds like.
Correct. Because Katie's a really good, she's always looking at things, researching, thinking about stuff. And she had hooked up with Dr. Powell and Kai.
Oh, gotcha.
And then she was telling me, and then she was telling me about it. And, was kind of like, what do you think? And that's how that all, and I did reach out to other friends about, would you like to be involved in this project? And a lot of people had a lot of fear about doing it, which I completely understand. We're so used to people attacking us for all sorts of ideas and thoughts we have. I mean, I can't tell you about my, spelling journey, and the criticism that, I've taken over the years. But I just, had to just put that aside because John Paul was just like, we have to do this. So that was kind of, and then when he passed away, Kai reached out to me. So we did all the testing and everything in 22, and John Paul just blew it out of the water like our kids do.
Right. Oh yeah, totally.
100% on everything. And it's interesting. You'll see how when we tested in two different locations, at my house and then at Katie's house. And at Katie's house, there were so many people in the room, like film crew and people, and John Paul struggling a little bit. And I'm thinking, what in the world? Because we just boom, 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 boom all the way through at my house. I mean, we did, 60, 4-digit numbers at least, and he was 100% on everything. And then he was struggling, and I asked him, I said, what's going on? And John Paul spelled, it's too loud in here, but there was no one talking. But he could hear everybody's thoughts, and it was very distracting to him. And a lot of what people were saying that John Paul told me later is that because John Paul, he's so busy and he has such a big busybody and he's just into everything. He said they were saying, talking about me, going, how in the world does she do this every day?
Oh, wow.
Regarding John Paul.
Just like, yeah, right.
I think it's hilarious, but that's what they were just kind of like, man. And then the Hill, people who will hopefully listen to the podcast will find out what the Hill is. The Hill was very excited about everything that was going on. This was real excitement, and so once at least we cleared out the room, And John Paul was fine. We just had to get all that extra noise out. And one thing Jeff Tarrant had kind of discovered with John Paul through the testing and the EEG, because John Paul was so determined, he wore the cap. You know, that's John Paul didn't even wear a Band-Aid. So he was working so hard to have this cap on his head. I mean, he was just, you know, determined. And Jeff Tarrant was looking at him like, you know, he's never not in a telepathic state. I mean, he's just always on. So it's really hard. Can you imagine things coming into you all the time? That's just something he realized, like with John Paul's EEG, that was different from, say, the others. So, you know,
that's interesting, Libby, because Stone has shared something similar early on pre-telepathy tapes. Kind of like early on, you know, when he became open and like I'm trying to learn everything I can about him. We're having these long conversations, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Yes.
Right. And I remember like this distinctly. He's like, Dad, you have to understand my brain's not at all like yours. And he said, when I'm around people, I can hear what they're thinking. He basically said, like, I'm taking in so much information all the time, like you can't even comprehend it. And I was just like, okay, like trying to understand, right? Because in our muggle's mind, you know, it's hard to, it's really hard to draw a comparison. But then later, I think it's when we did our trip a few months ago for the surfing camp, and we were sitting there in the airport lobby waiting for our flight, and he was really dysregulated. Like you could just tell was just really just not quite himself, really. And I just kind of asked him, I'm like, you know, is it too busy here? And he's like, yeah. I said, how many voices are you hearing right now? He said, I don't know, at least 40 or 50. And, you know, it's kind of like, no, right, exactly. Can you imagine? Like, I would be dysregulated. I get dysregulated.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because you're hearing so many, and then here's my, you know, thing too, is if they're hearing negative, can you imagine how dysregulating that is? When they're hearing negative thoughts a lot. That would.
I can't. I really can't.
You know, I don't necessarily want to know what someone's saying about this or that or me or, you know, and John Paul was so loud and he was stuck into such loops. His loops were really made it really tough to be in public places.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure that he heard a lot of negativity, you know, about that.
But to that point, I think that's one of the many amazing qualities that our kids have that, you know, JP had and Stone certainly has, and so many of the others that that in spite of all that, they are so full of love, you know, and compassion and empathy for others.
That's incredible. Like that you said that, because that's exactly what John Paul would spell. Because people, for the most part, John Paul was such a big, jolly guy that a lot of people really responded well to him. I mean, you know, he wanted to high five people. He just loved being in people's energy, I think. And he always managed to run up to, you know, people who sort of almost had a connection to like special needs or something. But even if they didn't, or even if someone wasn't kind, or people even that were close to me, if they weren't kind, which, you know, did happen occasionally, John Paul would spell, they don't understand, just love them. And one thing Thomas had asked him, his twin, one time, and people always kind of roll their eyes about superpowers and this and that, but Thomas did ask him, John Paul, what's your superpower? You know, and John Paul spelled that he could see somebody and see their pitfalls and understand why they do what they do, and just to love them anyway. Like he could see their pain. He could see why they're this way. And he could see beyond it. And just
that is a superpower.
It doesn't matter. It is. It's a wonderful power. And if we could all have it, right?
Oh, we need, we need that. So let's talk though, because this is something we both wanted to talk about. Let's talk about your past as a speech therapist and the role that this played, because as you alluded to, there's, for whatever reason, we know the reasons, but there's,
Yeah.
these supposed controversy around spelling in some circles, particularly in the speech therapy world.
Right.
But tell me about that, and how did that impact you, in the journey, and then also in terms of, and as you started working with JP and kind of progressed with it.
Right. Well, the thing is I had been a speech language pathologist. So I started in 99. That was when I was an art teacher before that, and then went back at 26. I knew I was going to go back and do it. So that was like my long-term goal.
Okay.
So it just, where I was in school, I was playing volleyball and I was on scholarship, and they didn't have a undergrad program, but I was always loved art. And so I'm going to get my teaching degree, be an art teacher, and then go back. So that was kind of why that, and actually art and speech pathology are a beautiful marriage together. Really. I use it all the time in my practice. And anyway, so then I did that. I worked in the schools. I worked in and I started my own practice. I worked in clinics, contracted, and then I wanted to have like 5 years under my belt before I did my own thing. I just wanted to see as many kids as I could. And I did screenings at different preschools. So I really, I've seen tons of different kinds of kids and all sorts of all different disabilities, all different levels of autism. Um, and so then I had my boys in '06. And John Paul, he's a regressive autistic. So regardless of what people think happened or whatever, I'm just kind of interesting because we do have a predisposition for it in our family anyway. Like it's, so
Interesting.
who knows?
And he's also a twin. Which,
well, I mean, I hit all the things. I have twin boys. Like I remember being pregnant with twin boys, and I do have we do have it in family. And I was thinking, oh boy, I'm just going to be positive, but the funny thing is, intuitively, I was always concerned about baby B, and that was John Paul.
Interesting.
Just something, even when I looked I just said, I just had this weird intuition. I said, I'm just worried about this one, and I'd point to my belly. And so then they were born and everything was moving along fine. And then around the time, around 18 months or so, he started regressing. And it was terrifying, whether or not, there's a million different theories about it. They're very controversial, as we both know.
Yeah, right. I'm right there with you, Libby. So,
yeah, it's very controversial. And I tell you, I've been on both sides of thinking about this, and it tortures me, actually. It tortures me. So I sometimes just people want to talk about all that. It's just very hard for me to talk about because I don't know, and I don't know enough, and it just,
nobody does.
Anyway,
the fact is nobody does.
Right. It's just, but anyway, so that happened.
Yeah. Anyway, so that happened. Right. So the regression happened. Yep.
And it was like, I forgot everything I knew. I was so in shock because it was like watching a train wreck. I couldn't stop. It just kept coming and coming, and no matter what I did, and it was terrifying. It was terrifying. It's like it didn't happen overnight. It was just slowly losing skills. And then I remember taking him back to the pediatrician after maybe 6 months or so. And I said, what's going on? And our pediatrician looked like he had seen a ghost. And he said, oh, he really is different. And you could see this absolute fear in him. He left the room and never came back, but had a sheet of paper that said Marcus Autism Center and the phone number. And that was it, David.
Wow.
That's what I got. And
I'm sorry. Wow.
It was so bad, but he didn't want to talk about it. You could see the fear in his eyes. He didn't know what had happened either. And I just felt so alone. was the saving grace was that I was working with a mom who, she actually really guided me. And I was so grateful because I knew about a million different therapies. That's the problem is you know about so many things. What's the right thing to do?
Yeah.
So that was my biggest, what do I want to do the right thing? What is the right thing? And I was really lucky. And, I know that this therapy is still alive and well, but we started with DIR Floortime.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And Atlanta has a really great practice here called It's for Children, and it's DIR Floortime related. And then I did all these classes with Barbara Dunbar, who was a DI. They have this practice, and we did parents training with it. I love DIR Floortime. I love it. And so that's what we started with.
For those who are listening,
What were you
well,
gonna
I'm just
say?
no people are listening. I'm like nodding along because I'm just right there with you again, Libby. I mean, it's uncanny. Just real quick, I'll tell you again because some of the parallels. Again, we saw regression with Stone again, twin brother. It wasn't quite as slow. Some of those memories, Libby, to be honest, are just it's kind of a blur, right? I mean, because
It's a terrifying blur.
well, that and also just like sleep deprived blur. We're parents of twins for crying out loud. I don't know about your guys, but my guys weren't on the same schedule,
sleeping.
and they'd stop sleeping.
David, he stopped sleeping. He was sleeping. That was one of the things is Thomas slept. John Paul just stopped.
Wow.
And it was a nightmare.
Yeah. So there are all those things. And like I said, just the parallel. And I remember I going back to the pediatrician again about 6 months later. Same thing, like what's going on? Because his brother, he had started babbling and had stopped, and a lot of these other signs or whatever. And he, it wasn't quite that bad. All I got though was like, well, he's, some kids are just slow. And that's when I was like, okay, yeah, we'll see you later. We're gonna find another pediatrician because that's not cutting it.
Not enough.
Yeah, need a little bit more than that.
Not enough.
But go on. So
Exactly.
okay, so you started. Oh, I was gonna say we did DIR too, and actually Stone's doing it again. He went back.
I love it.
He started about 9 months ago, has the same therapist, and it's been great because obviously, for the motor and things like that, it's
so
really helped.
It's so good.
Yeah.
In Stone's case, it's not child centered, it's adult centered, because he's an adult, but it's driven by the participant, the person doing it. It's child directed, and it doesn't cause trauma. It doesn't cause any, it builds. Even when you're little, it's going to build language. I mean, it's just the best thing. I'm glad we started with that. I really am. And then, of course, we went into speech therapy, OT, all the things. And what I loved was our OT was a sensory integration OT. So John Paul was a sensory monster. Didn't get enough sensory. And that was, so I feel like we really addressed a lot of things. I was really obviously, of course, hopeful for speech. That was something I really was hoping for. And it never came back. He had words, he lost them. They never really came back. The only time he did talk 2 times that was really interesting, both the times coming out of a seizure. And
interesting.
It is. It's really interesting. This happened twice, and he was a big boy, like 15 or so, right?
Right.
15 or 16. He had a seizure, and luckily, seizures were absolutely terrifying for us because he was so big and he would go down, and they were they were so frightening and horrible. And I still like, if the house was too quiet, all of a sudden I was worried that he might be getting ready to fall, and Thomas would come. If he heard me scream a certain way, his name, Thomas would be downstairs in a second. Even if I could call him forever, he wouldn't hear me. But if he heard this particular tone, he was down. He could hear it through his headset. He was downstairs helping me if Peter wasn't home or, whatever. But anyway, both times when he had the seizure, when he was coming out of them, one time he said, "I'm so sorry." And then he says, "I'm so sorry." And then the second time he said, "I love you so much." Those were the two times he spoke to me. That was, and what I
Wow.
find so interesting is it was coming out of a seizure. And I felt like maybe in some way the path was
Yeah,
clear for, whatever
I think
happened,
you're
it
right.
created a clear pathway, because it was clear as day. And those were just, so when people say, we'll talk about it, but I had this therapist say to me one time, if he wanted to talk, he would talk. And
Oh yeah.
I said,
Yes, I've
"Well,
heard
you
it.
know what? I mean, trust me, he knows." It's like, he knows he wants to talk. He knows he can't,
Who in their right mind wouldn't?
he cannot motor plan it. He
Yeah.
cannot motor plan it. There's so many systems that have to work in sync together to talk. It's very complicated actually, but we're born to talk. If you're going to talk, you're going to talk. It's just some Paul had apraxia. And my whole thing is, if you don't know what apraxia is, you shouldn't be working with our kids. Without knowing apraxia, you're fighting a losing battle.
So did that help you, Libby, understanding apraxia? Do
Yeah.
you feel like
Oh my
um
gosh. Well, it did, but I will tell you this, David. I still, until we found spelling, I really did not quite get the whole picture. I knew
yeah.
John Paul was apraxic, but I didn't realize that his cognition was truly fine. It was,
I think
I
again,
still,
that's the case for all of us, right?
yeah,
Because
I still felt like he doesn't understand what I'm asking him. How in the hell am I going to teach this kid? Um, I just,
yeah.
I couldn't, he could do these incredible physical feats, like as far as spinning on his swing
Oh yeah,
and,
right, right. Oh
and,
my God, yes.
and doing certain really amazing things that were like something out of Cirque du Soleil, but he couldn't, do the fine motor. And we know fine motor is fingers, toes, and tongue. Those are our fine motor things. And that's what a big problem for him. And then you throw the sensory issues in, and I mean, all of our sensory systems are affected. And then you throw in anxiety and OCD and all the things. And I mean, it's a hot mess. So I really was, we had worked with an AAC person who was very good,
Mm.
excellent. I mean, we had some absolutely, I feel like we had some of the very best therapists you could ask for. But the problem was just, it was just, didn't nothing budged until we started spelling. I mean, I can give you a list of, I loved the therapies that did the whole body brain. I loved aqua therapy. I loved hypnotherapy. I loved anything that was like that. It was fabulous. But the traditional speech therapy was not effective for John Paul. And
Yeah.
and ABA was, I will say this, I mean, we'll get into more of ABA, but um, you know, I got talked into doing ABA by a mother who, um, he just said, don't you want him to be able to, uh, like the whole thing was function in the normal world?
Right.
Don't you
That
want
was
him
that was the
to be
language that was
able?
the language used.
Yeah, I mean, really, and I said, and I felt like, well, I haven't really looked at it. I mean, I'm kind of like no stone left unturned kind of thing. And so, of course, we did it. Now, the first ABA therapist, this is my other critique, is they're not all created equal.
No.
They're not all, they don't all have the same. I was working with the BCBA as opposed to an RBT, and she was fantastic. And but he was also
And
so little. He was so little,
how,
David. He was
how
only
old did you
like,
start ABA?
I
I
want
was
to say, looking back now, I want to say maybe 5 or
okay.
so, 4 or
Yeah.
5, I feel like.
Okay.
I mean, again, it's all a blur.
It's all a
All
blur.
a
I
blur.
know it's not like these milestones aren't
And
clean. Yeah.
right, it's just a blur. And after we found spelling when John Paul was 8, I left ABA altogether. out the
Yeah.
door. It
Oh,
was,
yeah.
yeah, it was a disaster really for us. I feel like ABA is better for kids who have better motor control because like maybe ASD 1 and 2 kind of kids do better with ABA, but our kids, it's a disaster. And if you don't know apraxia, then yes, you think everything's a behavior because what you're seeing looks, but they can't control it. It's like it's what you see is really not what's going on, and so it doesn't help to observe a behavior because it
The,
doesn't
beha-
mean anything.
the behavior,
And
I mean,
then
I was going to say it's meaningless. It's
it's
absolutely
meaningless.
meaningless.
And they don't, and I mean, I've worked with tons of RBTs as far as been in clinics, and this is post spelling. And it's just so difficult because I feel like the therapists, the RBTs are so indoctrinated into this mindset that and then they don't have enough experience to know. Some do. I can't say, we're not going to talk about everybody because I know a lot of what I call them enlightened RBTs, enlightened BCBAs.
Yeah, right.
But they're willing. See, my whole thing is I love being so wrong. For me, being wrong was the best thing in the world. I changed everything when we started spelling about my practice. I changed it all. I was like, but also I had a John Paul. Most therapists don't have a John Paul or not, in their lives. So they weren't desperate. They didn't really know the struggle. Like even I will say that even when I was going to houses and I was working 8 hours a day and I was in these homes, um, I still didn't get it. I didn't get it until I had John Paul. And we're
Mm.
talking, working, in all sorts of different, being in their home, working at clinics, working in the school. I still didn't understand what it really was really like. There's no way unless it's 24/7. You just don't understand.
No, you're right. There's no comparison. And, in my case, I would even go so far to say it's again, I didn't really get it like until we started spelling so much. I mean, for
Yeah.
all the therapies that we did, and as much as I threw myself into the world of autism, as I know you have, and so many of the parents, in
Oh,
our
yeah.
world, the books, everything, I think it still did no justice until, we finally could sit down and they could point to those letters and tell us and explain it to us, like, and
Like
how wrong everyone
it's
was.
maddening to me. Yes, how wrong. And so it's sort of like I cringe. Like I have to get some hours in before I pay Asha to keep my C's or whatever. And I'm sitting there listening, going, they have their information is antiquated. If they're not talking about the brain body disconnect and they're not talking about spelling and that they're sitting there thinking they have to teach our kids language that are in their teens, and I'm like, you're boring them to death. And it just, you're not the thing is that what I realized when I was working in the school system, this was like a course right out of grad school. Everything I did, every assessment I did, it always, and same with maybe, it involves motor planning.
Everything.
Touch the boy riding the bike, point to your nose. All these things are requiring a motor, and it's not even that, they're also requiring motor planning under pressure. And
Right.
if you want to throw in telepathy, they also can hear the person and what they're thinking. So it's like,
That's right. That's a great point.
How in the world? Like, I know there was this. Oh gosh, I don't want to be negative.
Libby,
But,
no, it's okay. It's okay to be a little negative
well,
sometimes. You can't always be a ray of sunshine.
It's just that I've seen so many therapists that go above and beyond to disprove our kids. And to me, that is about the most unloving, cruel thing you can do. If you are not, I don't even understand why somebody has an opinion if they haven't done the training and they haven't seen it firsthand? How in the world can you formulate an opinion about it? And so and including myself, before John Paul is my supervisor. So I don't really blame the therapist. They're depending on the knowledge of people above them. They're
Sure.
depending on their supervisor's knowledge.
Right.
And they're like, I was just this girl right out of grad school. So like, say Asha tells you FC has been debunked. Okay. So then I tell other parents, oh no, FC's been debunked. Well, let me tell you, FC is what took Don Paul and I further into our spelling.
Oh,
FC
interesting.
is an absolute valid form. You have to be trained, just like everything. You have to be trained
Proper
well.
training. Oh yeah, I've known I've had a chance to meet lots of FC families.
I love it. FC family just said, hell with you. We're still going to do this. I love that because that's what I did. Like, I didn't really even know. I have to tell you, I was at a prompt conference when this girl sitting next to me, we were doing prompt therapy, which is for apraxia. I was doing it to learn for John Paul as well as other clients that I had at the time. And she just looks at me and says, I just went to this conference in Texas and I really feel like this would benefit your son. She was this really sweet young therapist that just wanted me to know about this. And then I got a text the same time from another friend 5 minutes later saying, and I'd heard about this before, I just wasn't putting it together. One woman handed me a sheet of paper with RPM and all the details written on it. And it was like, kind of like, I think it was going to keep circling in my universe until it like hit me in the face. It did. And it just so happened that, Elizabeth Vossler was doing RPM and she was at the time. Now she does, of course, she creates Spelling to Communicate.
Her STC,
She was doing RPM. That was her beginning with Selma. And Elizabeth was the first person to work with John Paul. And what did it for me was finding out, like, I didn't know there was this crazy controversy. I was just excited to try something. So I went to the first workshop and saw kids just like John Paul sitting down and spelling. And I didn't do all this. What is the trick here? What is the, I was just like, oh my God, I can't go.
That's so cool. Yeah, right.
John Paul, I asked Elizabeth, I said, do you think my son can do it? And she said, how old is he? I said, he's 8. She's like, oh God, he's been spelling for years. And so I brought him to the next workshop. Sure enough, it was physically harder for John Paul to sit still. I mean, she was doing a great job of trying to keep, because, not all the kids sit there beautifully. It's like, my kid would never do that. I'm like, did you think it started that way? No, it didn't start that way.
Especially at 8.
Struggle. Yeah, it can be a struggle.
Yeah.
But you stick with it. And Don Paul, in that very first lesson, I was flabbergasted. I tell you, after I went and watched kids doing it before they've even started, I couldn't stop crying. I literally cried for a week. I was absolutely gobsmacked. And it's always shocking for me. It is for parents who just refuse to accept it or believe it. I just don't understand what the block is, because more and more parents are doing this. Speech therapists have to be secretive about it, or they think they do, because Asha has threatened them. But I mean, honestly, I think it's an empty threat personally.
I do too.
I think it's just, it's when you're a young therapist and this is your way of making a living, you do not want anyone to mess with it. So they're intimidated. At this stage, I don't care. I'm old now. I could care less. I'm like, I have never.
Well, you could be a truth teller. You know what I mean? I don't know about but you've lived the experience.
Well, it's so maddening. I remember after John Paul started spelling, Thomas was playing baseball and there was this mom on her son and Thomas were on the same team, but this particular child had a sister who she wasn't autistic. She had something else, but she couldn't speak. Now, spelling, we know, isn't just for autistic.
Right.
It's for anyone who has apraxia or who has, but my thing is, I told her all about it. I was so excited. She was kind of excited. Then she called her speech therapist, who probably was in her right out of grad school. And this girl said, "Oh, it's not real." So that was the end of the conversation. And I'm sitting there going, I can't believe that just happened. So this girl was probably she was following Asha, but I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I've been doing this for so many years and I'm spelling with kids and I'm like, how could she just dismiss it like that so quickly? It was mind blowing to me. Every time I see this child on Facebook, whatever, I keep thinking, my God, and
Oh
you
yeah.
can't, you can only do so much. You can only tell people about it and do your very best. And at that point, but I do blame Asha for a lot of it. I do think that they have just really
absolutely
done a disservice. It is bad stuff. And um, there's so many misconceptions about spelling. Parents think this is a recent one that parents think if they're spelling with the laminate board, somehow that is less impressive than a AAC device. And I'm thinking,
why?
what they're using, what are they saying? Come on. I don't get it. I don't get it, David. It's so much misinformation and just eventually two spellers. I mean, it is. It's like a whole paradigm shift has to happen. And I get so it really keeps me up at night because I don't understand. I was never happier than to find spelling. I was so happy to be wrong. I had
that's the attitude to have
ego whatsoever about it.
Yes, it's ego. So yeah. I think it's twofold.
I don't know what this ego is.
Well, because you're special, but a lot of people like the ego is there. So I'll tell you two quick stories. Getting back to your point. So one, like you said, in terms of the effort to debunk it, like to go to that extreme, we went through that firsthand when, again, Stowe started spelling, long story short, similar story, right? We're thrilled. I'm excited. Can't wait to share it with the world. This is going to change everything. I go to the school and say, hey, can we have letterboards, in his classroom? That's when he was still just at a public school doing intensive ed. And, they said no. The speech therapist said no. She's like, we're going to follow ASHA guidelines, blah, blah, blah. But then we sued them. We had to do this assessment. Here's the point. This is like unbelievable to me. It's the first day we go in the assessment and Stone took off. Like he became a super speller quickly, became open and really fluent. He has been just a rock star. So I said, we sat down for the assessment. I said, Stone, is there anything you want to say before we start the assessment? Right. And this is like, I'm just holding the letterboard. And he just said something, I'm going to paraphrase. So basically, the happiest day of my life was my last day at the school. This place is toxic. Right. Wow. Like he just as clear, and I'm writing it. This is back, when I had to write it down or whatever. And so we do through this BS bogus assessment, right? Like you said, because it's based on motor planning. Of course, they had to do the message passing. But even throughout it, he would stop every so often and say, why am I doing this? I don't want to go to school here. Right. And so he's saying this. So they come out with their bogus, assessment report. And of course, all they focus on are, how many inaccuracies, the prompting, and, that was required because he was still relatively new at the time. It still needed some prompting. It was all about that. Of course, no reference to his statements or, what he actually was saying. And I just lost. I just flipped out because when we had our IEP meeting, it was like a really short meeting because I was just, it was a cartoon. I had like the steam coming out of my head and my, I always joke about because it's the one time my wife and my attorney were like texting me, just saying, just stop. We're done. Cause it was just so bogus.
I know, David, I can't imagine. Cause we didn't have to deal with that because right when we were doing the spelling, Hirsch Academy had opened a classroom for spellers. Hirsch had kind of jumped on the bandwagon. So, and then, a year later, Lily moved down for the spelling school. And of course, Lily and John Paul fell in love, and
I love that story.
it was
That's
so
so great meeting Lily.
so wonderful. And that's how John Paul, and Lily got together. And so thank God I never had to fight the school system. I remember JP was at a school right when we started spelling. But I did have the experience of, he was at like an ABA style school. And I remember being so excited and telling the person in charge who had the school all about it. And she basically laughed in my face.
You poor sap.
Just now, this is someone with no background really she was running an ABA style school, but she herself was not so well versed. Some people just, and I'm sitting there thinking, I cannot believe she doesn't want to know more about this. But here's the nice thing. That's a happy ending. Because luckily and this was, it was rough for John Paul. I didn't realize, he had wet clothes, and they were spraying him in the face with water when he was doing like his punishment. I'm not
Oh my
kidding
God.
you. The punishment, yes, it was. And I keep going back to this and going, if that was happening to your child, you'd probably freaking sue the school system. Why is it okay for my child? Come on now. So I think people, this whole positive, negative reinforcements thing makes me crazy. It's such dog training, and
It's
they don't
dog
even
training. Absolutely.
realize it, how bad it is. And I remember and I said, thankfully I got John Paul out of there, and he started at Hirsch. And, but the nice thing is that this particular person maybe they needed a few moments because but again, the freaking ego, and sent me a video of them spelling with their child, because they had a child that was
Oh, okay.
That's why they had started school. And I said, okay, there we go. But and I didn't need I'm sorry. I didn't care. All I cared about was that this person is spelling with their child. And hopefully this person is going to change everything about the school that they have, because how can you not, once you know what the truth is? How can you not? That's my thing. How can you not change once you've seen this? And so I really have a hard time with all these therapists. It's Asha that I have a hard time with. How can they have these things on their board, this code of this ethics about spelling? How is that possible when you've seen kids spell? How is it possible, David? I don't get it.
I don't get it either, other than it's about money. I think it's pure and simple.
It's gotta be. I mean, are they tied in? I keep thinking, who are they? Are they tied into ABA? Is that the issue? I mean,
yes, I guess they are.
honestly,
I mean,
it's gotta be.
there's a lot
Gotta be
crossover.
something.
I've done
Because
some research into it. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, again, if you do the math, Libby, think again, we're just two families that our path was remarkably similar in terms of how,
yeah.
do the math. How many hours of speech did we pay for, or insurance pay for? How many
Oh,
hours in
no, it's
ABA?
terrible.
And we didn't even do the maximum. I know families,
Neither did
they
we.
get right 20 hours, 30 hours a week.
No.
And I'm sure your experience, you go to spelling and it's like 2 hours a week and does more. Yeah, we got more
It
out
did
of.
more for us than anything. I appreciated. I was just so grateful. I mean, it proved. One thing I will say that I'm glad this person there was a family who had been spelling, and I asked the dad, I said, did it make all the other things go away? And he said, no, it didn't. And that's the truth. It did not change John Paul's pica. It didn't change his, sensory monster urges. It did not change those things, but it gave him a voice. And now I knew what he thought about. I knew what he liked. I got to hear his own voice as far as his personality, what his beliefs were, it was magic. It was magic. Yes. I mean, it was absolutely heaven for us.
What about regulation? Did it help his regulation at all? Once he started
Right?
speaking?
Yeah, it did because like I could if he could let me know if he really wasn't like I think about this like parents drag their kids to things all the time because they don't know that their kid may really feel bad. John Paul had a lot of pain. I mean, he lived with pain. He
Yeah,
had headaches, he had gut issues, he had all sorts of like he couldn't feel his body in space. He
as
had
many of our
so
kids
many
do.
things.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and these parents are dragging them for like 8 hours at this freaking ABA facility where I mean, can you imagine having to do stuff when you feel like hell? And so with John Paul, I could say, if you I said, "How are you doing?" And he could spell. I remember with this pica when he swallowed 5 4-inch nails, David, and
Oh, good
he
God.
came up to me with the board and he said, "It hurts so bad."
Oh my
And
gosh.
yes, and so, but he wouldn't. I don't know if I would have understood what was happening if he couldn't spell out to me. And it's different than a board saying, don't feel good, because
Right. Right.
he could give me more information, and I could find out maybe he didn't want to go. Like I would think he'd want to go to a dance. He's like, no, I don't feel well. And if I dragged him to that dance, he could have easily had a meltdown or
Yeah.
been unhappy. So for regulation, it was helpful because I could stay ahead of what the needs were,
You're
what the issues
I mean,
were.
again, it sounds so basic, but it's so powerful. We're able to ask what's going on. There are
Yeah.
times, again, I can sense things. Can't remember how long ago it was, but it was like the first time Stone told me he had a headache. I was like, that's
Mhm.
awesome. Like, that's great.
Yeah.
I can give you ibuprofen. I can help
Right.
solve this problem now instead of him having to suffer all day with his headache.
Exactly.
And like you said, try to do all these things that we're expecting him to do, whether it's school or whatever. And
Right.
right. I mean,
And our kids are
we take it.
so sensitive,
Oh yeah.
and dragging them to things all the time. I mean, the best advice Barbara Dunbar with it for children said, she just took this guilt away from me. She said, Libby, I just want you to know, uh, she, she also, she had so much experience. She'd been doing this a very long time, and I really love people with some experience who've seen a lot of things because she said, where he's happiest? At his house. He's like,
Mm,
he's happy at his house with his people. So it really took some guilt that we're not out doing 5,000 things. Cause like on social media, just, people on social media want to show all this big life they're having and all the things they're doing. Your kid
right.
may not actually want to do that, and we were able to have, I feel like, a pretty good balance between doing what Thomas needed or what he wanted, but Thomas actually was sort of a homebody himself. So it wasn't like, I think people get this idea that they have to be a certain way and you really don't. Like, I think that's part of like letting that go and not trying to create this crazy life or this life that looks so picture perfect in social media like people do because it's the worst thing you can
Well,
do.
yeah, I think you're right from kind of a general parenting in 2025 standpoint. But I also think that there's an aspect, just speaking personally, and I've heard other parents talk about it. There's that catching up feeling that you need to catch up with what was missed all those years, like in Stone didn't start spelling until he was almost 17,
Right.
and
See, that's
so
different. That's many years. That's different time frame from dump hall to, there is more years there.
there's, all those years lost. And gosh, I mean, there's a whole nother conversation I would love to have with you. And maybe we can do a part two because I think one of the things I haven't explored a lot that I think doesn't get talked about is kind of the family dynamics.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. It's so interesting how many of our kids are twins, first of all, and one's
I know.
neurodiverse, one's neurotypical, and the other's not. And I mean, that
Right.
whole thing, whatever, is just kind of interesting, right? But then there's the whole dynamic of managing that as a parent, as a family unit. Like, how did you,
It's
how do
hard to
you,
manage.
it's, yeah, it's really hard. And it's hard for the siblings. I remember,
Yeah.
you kind of referenced that about how Thomas, kind of had his hideaway, right? To kind of just, because it's
Yeah, it
hard.
was hard. It's hard. And I think that's where a lot of guilt comes in for families because they want the typical sibling to have the normal life that every other kid gets. It's a real juggling game.
And there's nothing normal about being the sibling
No,
here, right? Like
nothing.
right. And there's nothing
No.
about their whole childhood, right? They didn't have their brother to play with or
It's
all
so
that
different.
stuff, right? It's just
Right.
and they have to go to the
It really is.
appointments.
I mean, yeah, it's different. It really is. I always tried to spin it for Thomas, though, that he knows so much more about what's important. Like I always tried to spin it that, Thomas, you really, I mean, we tried to do all the things he wanted to do. I gave him special things as far as like at night, I'd let him come hang out with me in my bed at night. We would, for years he would, because that was his special time.
That's his
We would
time.
jump
Yeah.
on the bed. We figured out the sleeping once we figured that out, and that was John Thomas's special time was to come hang out, and he could fall asleep or he could go back to his room, but that was his special time, and we would watch shows together and talk. And he had me out on the basketball court in our yard, in our driveway. Like I did all the things that I gave him as much as I, to a point of it. I just wanted to balance it. And it is hard. It's so hard. And it'd be hilarious. John Paul would be in the driveway naked and Thomas and I would be playing one-on-one, and luckily in the way our driveway is set.
Yeah, I can
like,
visualize it now that I've been there. Right?
Oh, I know. It was so fun. I mean, I loved hanging out with the boys in the
It's the best.
yard in the driveway. And I just, I put a comedic spin on things. Like I just wanted Thomas to be able to laugh a little bit about it because it was so ridiculous that here's your, but I just didn't want everything to be doom and gloom all the time. Even if I was feeling it, I really tried to keep it my fear because I had a lot of fear. I was so afraid and I didn't want him to know how afraid I was. And that was, that's really hard for parents. And I think there were times I was successful at it and not. You can't hide everything. And your kids are smart.
Well, especially when
our kids, I'm just saying our kids know, even if we're trying to hide it, like Thomas knew when I was up, even though I really tried to, I just didn't want him to carry the weight of the world. And I didn't want him to have to worry about me. That's what I didn't want. I didn't want him to be worried about what he can't control because that's a terrible feeling, and he can't, I just was really, that was something that I worked on for myself too, because I didn't want to put anything like that on him. And I think it's hard anyway, because it's going to happen sometimes just naturally. But I think sometimes as parents, we really have to think about, working on ourselves so that we can be better for them.
Yeah. But like you said, you can't hide. Some of it's just the reality. And what it reminded me of again, because we deal with seizures.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Stone he's still, he's under doctor's care. He has a prescription and all that, but he still gets them on a fairly regular basis every month, 6 weeks, whatever it is. And like you were saying before, it's terrifying no matter what.
Terrifying.
And, and for a brother, Ty's been through it. I've had to ask for his help, just like and that's, again, that's not typical. I mean, how many teenagers have to worry about their parents screaming for their help because their brother might have a seizure any minute? Tell me that's not traumatic, no matter what we do, right? Like, there's nothing you can do about that. But I'm sure, I mean, again, we do our best. I think we've done okay. Thomas is, I know he's flourishing in college, right?
Yeah. He's happy. He's, and I told him, I said, look, if you ever, because, with them all passing, I think it was senior year. Luckily he had a wonderful group of friends who spent the night at our house a lot because they'd all lock themselves up in the attic. So they all knew John Paul. It felt like it was kind of neat that they knew who Dunkel was. And but I told Thomas, I said, if you ever do need to talk to someone, I hope you will reach out because it's very helpful. And it might be when he's in his 30s or 40s that he's like, hey, I really want, I don't know. I have no idea. I've done everything I can do on my end to make him at least know that he can ask for help if he needs it. And I've tried to get him to things. He just doesn't want to talk to anybody. Like,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
he's like, wow, I don't need this, So I'm like, well, if you ever do, I'm
You're
totally
there.
here for you.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit, shift gears a little bit to Presume Compfest, because that was such a cool event. And again, that's kind of what brought us together. I told the story a little earlier. I kind of gave a recap of my great autism advocacy adventure with Stone, and mentioned about how we got the speaking gig, and I reached out to you because we had become Facebook friends, of course, and all that, and just like, hey, what a great chance to, meet Libby in person. I think you and Kim had gotten together and sent me that fun little video, video text and everything, and then you're like, oh, are you coming down here for Presume Compfest? And I was like, what is that?
That was such a happy little occurrence because honestly, it all started with Nicole Gabe's mom saying, I want to come to visit. And I said, great. And then I didn't realize she had reached out to Betsy and to Sarah. And then Austin and Betsy are in cahoots, and they'd been talking about doing this Presume Comp thing. And so when I thought it was just going to be a couple of parents turned into, and so when you called, I just assumed that Betsy had invited
It was just part of that.
Like, that's when I always go, things happen the way they're supposed to happen. Like there really is something to just the universe working, in a certain way, because you couldn't have orchestrated that any better.
No. And then that's the segue. Okay. I want to segue to having Stone write about his experience, because he wants to, he wants to share about that. And he's made a couple of videos. So I'm going to share what Stone's excerpt from his story. So he said, yes, here in Atlanta, I also got to connect with other non-speakers, being around great minds at an event called Presume Compfest. Yes, it was now Friday, and we went to the house where my friend JP lived. He died suddenly in September 2023 after he had a seizure. Yes, it was powerful being there for so long. I really felt his presence as soon as we arrived. A butterfly greeted us pretty much as soon as we made our way to the house. It felt like JP. Yes, I felt so comfortable there. JP's mom, Libby, is so full of love that flows throughout their house. I just wanted to sit there and soak in the love. Now it was time to go to a pizza party at Mellow Mushroom Pizza. They arranged for us to have the outdoor patio area for the party. The non-speakers could hang out and talk in their own way while the parents could talk and share stories. Yes, it allowed us to build a new community. Everyone was having so much fun. The best part for me was getting to see my dad connecting with other parents. Dad is a natural at that. He knows how to connect with people. The next day we gathered at Libby's house and socialized for a few hours. I smiled, feeling JP's love there. Yes, I believe he had a huge role making this happen. When I found out we had a speaking gig in Atlanta, I connected with JP and said, we know that we need to do more for non-speakers. What if we brought people together to talk through ideas? Yes, it started, but now we had to make it happen. I was completely thrilled to see so many people show up for it. You could feel the love everywhere, and we made plans for a bigger event next year.
I love that. I love that so much. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. Blew me away, right? Like it's just again, which he does all the time. It shouldn't anymore, but it still does. Just all of it.
Oh, it never gets old to me. It never gets old.
Never gets old.
What our kids say and what they, just how connected they all are and how dear they all are. It's absolutely astonishing and incredible to me. I love that so much, and I'm excited about the next event because we're going to extend it. Some of my friends were like, wait, we wanted to be there. This was actually a planning party for a bigger event that's going to happen. I was like, this wasn't a one and done kind of thing. This was a future thing for other people to join. Because no one wants to be left out. When
Right.
it's something
Right.
good like that. And I said, oh no, this was just a wonderful gathering to discuss future stuff. And I felt the love there. I felt so much love there from everybody. It was, and I did feel JP there the whole time. It was incredible. I know he was loving every minute of it.
Absolutely.
I think it's
Absolutely.
cute that, yeah, with Lily, because there were so many cute boys there, Stone and Bo and all these adorable guys. And I kept saying to Lily, I said, Lily, I don't expect you to walk this world by yourself. If you think someone's cute,
Aw,
don't
that's so
worry
sweet.
about me. And I'm like, I want you to love your life too. And JP's always there. Well, apparently, I think Stone and Bo and everyone, all the guys spelled, she's not ready. Because I think that was
Oh,
the general
interesting.
consensus.
Interesting. Probably. I mean,
Yeah,
it
they
makes sense,
spelled,
right? I mean, until
yeah, they just said Lily's not ready. But I do like the fact that everyone was there. She got to be in the presence of so many nice, wonderful young men. And I think that if I wanted to take that from her, like, don't worry about me. I'm always your mother and soul, but I loved it for just the connection. I loved it for so many reasons. I felt I just can't ever leave this community because it's just such a big part of my life. And I think that's the reason I became a speech therapist. So it's not like it was
right.
it was like this was like my calling, and let me put this off.
That's right.
Yeah, it was my calling, and I had like a full circle moment not too long ago where the reason I actually wanted to become a speech therapist was watching The Miracle Worker when I was like 8 years old. And I just was intrigued, and I'm like, that's what I want to be. But I didn't know there was a name for it till I got older. And I even have a photo of Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller at my desk. And what's so crazy is Helen Keller's granddaughter, she was
Or
Helen Keller was
grandniece.
her
Grandniece, right?
grandniece, yeah, because Helen Keller didn't have children,
Yeah.
so it was her. And so and I think she reached out to you too, but she reached out to me, or maybe with
She didn't
Austin,
reach
and
out to me, but I saw some of the comments. Right. Yeah.
yeah, she had reached out to me and just said, who she was. And I said, oh my gosh, I said, I feel like I'm having like a full circle. And look, and of course it's
That's amazing.
555 right now, which is also a big number. JP likes to send me, by the way.
Oh,
So very interesting. But that was such a big moment for me because she's doing great work herself, this young lady, and the fact that she reached out to us and that we're all spelling people, and she sees that. I mean, that's what saved her aunt's life. Her great aunt's learning the alphabet. I mean, it was 26 letters.
I
Um,
love that, and I love I've had friends and people in my world who've kind of also made that connection, like in terms of like when we first started the spelling, and they're like, this sounds so much. This reminds me of Helen Keller, kind of like that story, right? In terms of opening up her world, and we all talk about how it's unlocked our kids, and
yeah.
it's very similar, which again makes it that much more maddening that we're facing the resistance that we do in some circles. But again, we're gonna get through it. I have no doubt. Like that, the momentum is there, Libby.
We will. It's going to be okay. It's just going to take. It's just that I don't want kids having to wait that shouldn't have to wait.
Yeah. There's
I'm
no
so
time to
happy
wait for
that
them.
our kids have it. That's awesome. But it just keeps me up at night that this isn't just a normal thing in the schools that people do, that they presume competence right away. Like even ABA, is ABA presumed competence, and they got their training spelling and they understood apraxia. Oh boy, that would be a big improvement. If there's RBTs that suddenly go, wait a minute, and there's like this aha moment. So there are what I would call enlightened RBTs that admit that maybe this isn't the right approach that we have. It just takes people to be brave and to be humble. I think you have to humble yourself to realize maybe that you haven't
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
doing it right.
And it's not
best
you,
way.
right? Like, don't take it personally. You were taught the
Yeah.
approach the whole foundation and the approach that your skills or your training was based on was flawed. And that happens all the time, right? I mean, that's progress. That's what happened in every profession. You see that. You move forward, you learn, you're like, oh, okay, these assumptions, whatever they may are, work. We've learned from that. This isn't true. This is kind of the new reality.
Yes. It
And
is the new reality. And it's just that the problem, they keep wanting to make our kids prove it over and over and over again to their satisfaction. I'm like, what's more is there to show you? Like, I feel like it's like the emperor's new clothes, and you can't just state the obvious. You're not allowed to, and I don't know what all this science-based data is that has to do with ABA, because I don't see it. I don't see it in practice. I don't see why
that's a
it's almost
smokescreen.
like it's rhetoric. It's
It's rhetoric. Yeah, it is.
And they don't even know why they're saying it.
Yeah.
I mean, and they only know what their professor has put out to them. And that professor, I just feel like if I was doing the same thing I was doing 20 years ago, something's really wrong. Things
Right.
should progress.
That's a great way of putting it.
It's just, I look and I do see like friends of mine that are speech therapists. Some of them will kind of privately reach out to me and say, oh my God, this is so cool. And other ones just ghost, like they didn't ghost me, but they're terrified to even like something that I posted or talk about it, because they're afraid someone's going to report them. And so there's this, and the thing is, there is no scary monster. It's all
right.
It's this threat. It's like getting a threat of being spanked. So you behave.
The perception is there. Well, you were talking about the connection with ABA. There you go. Right.
Yeah,
The reward punishment.
That reward. All I know is Paul, all his teeth rotted out. From his ABA, luckily they were his baby teeth, so he got new teeth. But the candy giving was beyond.
Oh,
and,
yeah, right.
And the whole thing about, he would, if he wanted to talk, he would talk, and not understanding apraxia or the sensory piece to it.
Well, that's where just so much more education has to happen, and that's kind of part of my mission. Like we talked about apraxia. There has to be so much more understanding of full body apraxia, and again, just the profound impact. But I think married to that, Libby, is, and you alluded to this earlier, is dysregulation too. So, again, when they're in these positions, when they're supposed to be taking a test or doing whatever, assessments, all this stuff, how easy what dysregulation can do. I mean, we all get dysregulated. That's the thing. It's not just our kids, right? It's just different degrees. No one performs at their peak performance when they're dysregulated, when they're doubted, when they, again, you think about all this stuff. And that's my big argument against the message passing test. Besides the fact, again, that the goal is to debunk it, but think about how dysregulating it is.
So dysregulating,
right? Like, to know that this, like, the pressure is on you to come up with quote unquote the right answer.
Yes.
With all these people watching, and again, there's all this stuff, and anyway,
and all the doubt, and my thing is, what makes me so crazy is that so it gets proved, and then they want to increase the difficulty again.
Right. Let's ratchet it up.
Like, until let's keep making it harder until we get our way. And I'm thinking, and I remember doing the roundtable in California about these tests and everything, and one of the researchers just said, what are you going to do if we can't prove it? This was back before and stuff, and I said, well, it means nothing to me, because that doesn't mean it's not real, because I live it every day. You just can't prove it to your satisfaction. But it doesn't mean it doesn't, I said, come spend a day with me when John Paul was alive. And I didn't even talk out loud to him. He preferred, so I couldn't hear his thoughts, but he could hear mine. So I would just tell him, ask him something in my head, put it down. I do it with the kids I work with, to show their parents, so their parents know how sensitive their kids are, just so just keep your thoughts positive, because you're really affecting your child's regulation with your negative stuff. It's really hard for them. I mean,
It's really
think
hard.
about how miserable I am if I thought my mom was unhappy with me or my dad or anybody. And it would get me so flustered, but I could talk to them and I could say but here they've done this, like John Paul did some crazy loops. He had crazy loops. He flushed my jewelry down the toilet. It was this OCD loop he'd gotten in.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
obviously I would be unhappy, but I could also say, John Paul, I love you more than my jewelry. I'll get over it. I know this was a loop. I said, it's not the end of the world. It's just stuff. I was like, please he was flushing like my good stuff. I wish he'd let fashion jewelry flush it away, but my good stuff. But
Come on, JP, pick the right stuff.
at the end of the day, you don't take it with you. And I think just because I've had death now with my mom and my stepfather, and my dad, death is like, you don't take anything with you. It is the most, none of the stuff that we're all so concerned about. It just makes me laugh. I look at it and I think, golly, I said, if people knew that all of this doesn't matter and people matter, love matters,
Yeah.
taking care of each other matters. The bigger diamond on your ring doesn't matter. And no one, it matters to about the wrong things, but it's just having John Paul, and I think all of us having kids like our kids really lets you see the bigger picture. And John Paul would spell, nothing here matters but love. I mean, it was just his thing. Nothing here matters but love. And so maybe, in his own little ways, trying to teach me valuable lessons, maybe trying to teach me lessons, who knows? But it's just that sometimes I almost feel bad for people that don't get to see what we see and don't get to learn the lessons I think we learned.
We've talked about that as well.
Because it does change how you feel.
It totally changes. I mean, there really are no words. And it's, I don't want to say it comes at a price, right? It's not the right, it's not the right way to phrase it. It's just hard as hell, right? We alluded to that earlier. It's not like just this magical thing just kind of happened. Like, I mean, to get to this point, it's been a lot of work for everyone.
I'll tell you, it is. I remember when John Paul was, that summer before he passed, and he was such a joy, but he was really hard work. And I remember always thinking, am I going to be able to do this in another 15 years? I mean, I was scared. It was scary to think of, but then when you lose them, you miss the struggle, you miss your kid, you miss everything about them. And so there is it's actually more painful. I went to see Lily earlier today and taught at NIA school or did my art at NIA school. And I tell you, I missed John Paul so much today. I was really struggling today. So it's like really nice that I got through it. And now I'm here talking to you, because grief is just, it's a bitch. And I can't imagine. It was one of those days, David, and I mean, I tell you, he's really here. I know he's here. I know he's just on the other side of the veil.
Sure.
But I wouldn't mind that struggle.
Yeah.
I loved being with him. And sometimes I do see where parents are struggling, and I know it's so hard. But I wish people could also see the joy in some things. And I'll see, like on someone's Instagram, them starting to see the joy of their child. It's really tough when they're little and all the mean kindergarten moms are making you feel terrible. And the teachers are making you feel, there's so much judgment that it's so painful. And I think I dealt with a lot of that stuff. Is just mean moms that just made you feel bad that your kid couldn't sit in a chair and learn like everyone else, and I think that's the indoctrination into the brain sometimes, and it builds from there. But there's also, once you find your community, man, there's so much fun to be had, but you really have to seek out community.
It's everything.
It is
It's everything.
everything.
Well, I
Yeah.
think that's the perfect note to end this conversation on. I know there's so much more, Libby. I cannot thank you enough. I mean, just in terms of just being here, but also
This is great.
and being you, Libby, and showing up and being there for the community. I know you said it's your calling, but again, I think it's fair to say there's some people I think it would be easy to retreat and, and maybe protect yourself and grieve in your own way. And you've taken the opposite tact. And again, that love shows. I saw you with Stone and with so many others together, and it's really special. So thank you again for being here and being you.
You are so welcome. It was a joy. So great to talk to you again. I want our whole group to come back again sooner than later. It was so much fun.
Get the band together. So for those listening and watching, thank you for joining us. Make sure you send feedback to david.kaufer@a.com. Please leave a review. Let us know how we're doing. And until next time, it's the lighter side of the spectrum. We'll catch you later.